talk to the building committee on the great job that they have done over the last 2+ years, which started as a roof committee, which the chairman will get into later, which has evolved into a project committee with the proposal of a new Morgan school. I would also like to reiterate. I just was yelling at a bunch of 14-year-olds for about 2 hours down there coaching basketball. My voice is. I'd like to reiterate the fact that a year ago, or about 14 months ago, 13 months ago, this group came to the town in a public presentation and went through the scenarios that were possible with the proposed project. Renovate is new roofs, do nothing, new school, and the town and the boards that we're talking with tonight, subsequently, upon their recommendation of a new high school, approved them to go forward with conceptual designs of a new high school. And it went to town meeting, which members of the committee will talk to later on, and was unanimously approved at a town meeting to go forward with the plans of a new high school. This is what we're here to talk about tonight. We're not here to talk about renovate is new. That is past. We're talking about a new high school. So I would like to turn this over, and I would like to remind the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen, we voted to let them do this, by the way. I'd like to turn this over to the chairman, Jerry Beese, to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Will.
Harry, before you start, let me get the visual up for you.
First, I'd like to say thank you for Board of Education, Board of Finance, and Board of Selectmen members for attending this meeting and taking time to attend our presentation. My name is Jerry Beese, and I am the chairman of the Morgan Building Committee. We are an 8-member committee. Here this evening are David Townsend, Sally Heffernan, Jeff Stevens, Pete Nye, John Giannotti, and Peggy Sullivan. Dennis Donovan is on vacation in Florida. I would also like to introduce Mario Rubo to my left. He's from the Gilbane Construction Management Company. David Thompson and Stephanie Deegan-Monroe from David Thompson Architects. Jack Cross, our superintendent. Marianne O'Donnell, our assistant superintendent. And Carrie Hagnes, the principal of the Morgan School, are with us this evening. And I'd like to reiterate what Willie said, and I'd like to thank my committee members at this time for the dedication and time they've spent on this project. We started 2.5 years ago on this. The committee was organized 2 years ago to address the need for a new roof over the existing Morgan School. It was due to be replaced in the summer of 2011 at an estimated cost of $4 million. Recognizing the need to renovate parts of the building, the committee requested funds from the town to conduct a facility study. The committee then began the task of selecting a construction management company to study and assess the existing Morgan School for potential renovation or replacement. We advertised a written request for qualifications and received 5 responses. We interviewed 3 finalists and chose Gilbane Construction. Their report was completed, and this committee presented its findings to the town in February of 2011. The recommendation at that time was to replace the existing building with a new facility. After receiving approval from the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and overwhelming support at a town meeting, David Thompson Architects was hired to complete a conceptual design. Gilbane assisted Thompson with cost estimates for the new construction. During the design process, an agreement was reached with the Richards family to purchase property on Route 81 to locate the new building. We remain convinced that the findings of the Gilbane report are still valid. The increased costs attributed to the purchase of the land and the site work required will be offset by the economic gains realized by the sale of the old property and the potential real estate tax revenues associated with a new commercial development.
Unlike any of the other potential options assessed, the Morgan School relocation concept we're presenting tonight offers both short-term and long-term opportunities that are worthy of serious consideration. The town's Planning and Zoning Planning Committee has highlighted the area of the current Morgan School as a prime area for expanded commercial development to enhance the tax base. With the existing traffic flow that is generated, the area currently is unique in its dedicated existing commercial potential. Conservative estimates of the property value are in excess of $5 million. The potential sale and subsequent development of the property are likely to generate tax revenue in excess of $500,000 a year. While these figures do not reduce the town's share of the school's project's cost, they can have a significant impact on how the project would affect the tax burden on our citizens. The anticipated state contribution to the project is $19.1 million, leaving the local share of $45.6 million. The addition of approximately $10 million in tax revenue in the course of 20 years begins to make the local cost estimates more palatable. If the proceeds from the sale of the property and the additional tax revenue were to be applied directly to the anticipated cost, the figure would be $30.6 million. While this remains a significant number, it should also be realized that the town has had a recent history of capital expenditure investment of approximately $1 million a year in the existing school. With the current conditions unchanged, or an adaptation of a do-nothing approach, that figure is not likely to change, as we would likely see the slow feed of yet another $20 million into the existing structure with no significant change or upgrade. The construction of a new school simply eliminates that expenditure. With projected 20-year bonding likely secured at historically low interest rates, the savings realized from no requirement for that capital investment would cover approximately 100% of the bond's interest payment. We all know the potential revenue from the sale of the property, coupled with the potential tax revenue, will not be fully dedicated to offsetting the projected cost. Yet with responsible oversight of the sale and development of the existing site, coupled with the same degree of responsibility of revenue expenditures, the project can be reasonably affordable, with advantages reflected in the near future and benefits appreciated for decades to come. We're confronted with a unique opportunity with this option to relocate the Morgan School and are seeking your support to present this option to the public in the form of a referendum. Thank you.
I'll wait a second.
I have an image of the roof here. Is that what you want first?
No, the next one. As superintendent of schools, I've been asked to explain how a new high school facility will improve the learning experience for our students. The short answer is that the demands of the 21st century require students and teachers to engage in learning experiences that are interactive and focused on thinking critically and applying core knowledge to solve current real-world problems. While problem solving and critical thinking are not new learning experiences or expectations, the playing field continues to be very different. The tools, the access to information, and the pressures of competition that have changed the dynamics of teaching and learning in a public school setting, and thus the physical environment in which those learning expectations and experiences take place. And that place must be sufficiently flexible and versatile to meet these changing demands. The layout and infrastructure of the current Morgan School facility limits our ability to connect programs, student experiences, and teacher collaboration, and inhibits the opportunities to extend student learning beyond the desks of a traditional classroom. A new high school will assist the transformation efforts of the last 4 years to shift the focus of learning squarely on students being engaged in their learning and taking ownership of their pathway and on their way and what they aspire to achieve. A new high school facility allows us to design a learning environment that connects learning experiences in and out of the classroom and places student engagement and student ownership of their learning at the core of the institution. A new high school will support the changing role of the teacher from one of disseminator to one of collaborator and facilitator. A new facility incorporates and creates a student hub of learning that includes a state-of-the-art library media center, the new Learning Commons, surrounded by classrooms, technology labs, and flexible spaces for presentations, demonstrations, and small and large group sharing and learning. The new facility is designed to be flexible enough to anticipate the changing needs of the learner and the teacher, and will be equipped with technology tools that maximize students' and teachers' access to information and resources. A new building design provides the opportunity to bring our critical pathway programs of culinary arts, child development, science, technology, engineering and math, STEM, graphic and video production, and the arts from a 1950s model to the 21st century, in which they are integrated into the fabric of the school facility and are highlighted instead of hidden. A new building design allows for the integration of student support services, such as our guidance counselors, social workers, and school psychologists, to be located in the heart of student life and learning, instead of in isolated offices away from the students with whom they work. One of the most critical elements of a new school and the new site is to create a modern high school that is safe and secure. Retrofitting the current high school in order to secure the building and control access is problematic and would involve enormous costs. Moreover, the current location in a high-traffic commercial environment near the highway exit poses a concern for protecting our students while they are at school and school activities. The new building and a new site will also provide a campus complex that opens the door to extended learning, extended educational and cooperative ventures that are not currently possible. Connecting the campus with the Peters Recreational Complex and the Joel Elementary School allows for multiple school and community events that will benefit the school district and the Clinton community and instill the pride that is the Morgan School tradition. And lastly, a new high school facility will enhance our ability to prepare independent and collaborative learners empowered to embrace the future, theirs and ours. Thank you.
While I do this, let me just make a couple of comments here. Everybody see okay? Okay. So I'm David, David Townsend from David Townsend Architects. So we've been working with, initially, in fact, we were engaged by Gilbane Construction to assist them in the master planning process. We didn't have an independent relationship in a contractual sense with the town of Clinton. We worked fundamentally for Gilbane, with whom we've worked on many educational projects in the past. They brought us in to assist them provide an architectural perspective to that master planning process. When it was decided by the building committee that they were serious enough to move forward with the design, that's when we established a more direct relationship with the committee, and our roles have reversed with Gilbane, who are now effectively serving us as the cost estimators in this conceptual design process. I'd also mention, this doesn't sound too gratuitous, but it's been a real pleasure working with your building committee. I think it's an unusually diverse committee, represents a number of points of view. These aren't just the people who went into the process saying, yeah, we need a new school. There was a diversity of opinion when we first started out. It took some time for people to arrive where they did. And so that's been an interesting experience and quite gratifying. So the other thing that's really critical to know about how this whole process works. So I'm here tonight to present to you a very specific character of the design for a school that's come out of this conceptual design process. And it produces, we were asked by the committee to produce visual images of what this building would look like. And all that is just an attempt to understand the possibilities. And when it comes time to vote at the referendum, you won't be voting on this particular design, either in its bones, in terms of its planning characteristics, what it looks like. There's almost nothing about the design that can't be, and in fact won't be, revisited once the real process goes forward. We've been hired only to do this conceptual design. If it passes referendum, you go through an architect selection process. It's by state mandate in a very public process. They're required. Multiple consultants will be interviewed for the process, and we'll throw our hat in that ring, but we'll be one amongst many. And whoever ends up being selected as your architect will move forward with a design. It may look like this, it may look completely different than this. But what it's likely to be is a 135,000 square foot building or somewhere in that neighborhood, as compared to the, let's say, 150, I'm talking around numbers here, 155,000 square foot building that you currently have. In fact, the Morgan School is about 165, but again, round numbers, 8,000 or 10,000 square feet is devoted to things that are not specifically Morgan School related and are not reimbursable by the state. So our exercise is to study how we go from a school of 155,000 to 135,000 square feet and generate a cost estimate of the dollar figure that you just saw. And so the vote is fundamentally about that, doing a school of this size for that dollar figure. So having said all that, we're excited about the whole process. We think with the leadership of the building committee and the school staff people, it's been a fascinating process, and we're excited about where we are from a design point of view. So, but let's back up for a moment. The existing site, you're all familiar with it. Killingworth Turnpike, Route 95, the footprint of the existing building, the so-called buildable area of the site rendered in green here, the perimeter of it being the Indian River and other setback considerations which limit the area that one can do expansions on. So there are a number of limitations of the existing site. I won't go into all of them, but in broad terms, most fundamentally is this extraordinarily tight relationship to Killingworth Turnpike and the burden that puts on your daily arrival and departure and bus drop-off and student access to the site. The essentially one workable entry to the site. This, of course, a secondary one being here, poor service access. In terms of vehicular circulation approach, it's been re-engineered a couple of times over the years, particularly in connection with the retail development across the street. But it's just fundamentally hampered by the fact that the building is just so close to the street. Secondly, there's limited area for athletic fields. Not egregious necessarily, but it is what it is. And there's certainly no possibility of expanding on it, given the limitations of the river and the highway. And then furthermore, it's remote from the Peters Athletic Complex. So there's an inherent factor in this site of having to do the transport to the Peters Athletic Complex in order to serve your other functions. And then lastly, kind of broad brush things, is that over time, with the evolution, particularly construction of Clinton Crossing, that this site has taken on a whole different potential that it didn't have when it was first established as your highway. Now it's a fairly extraordinarily valuable retail piece of property, and one has to question whether the maintenance of a high school facility on this site is the best use of that property for long-term use. The school itself, again, many of you are familiar with it. It's not really a building, but it's a collection of additions done in agglomerated fashion over a long period of time, one by one by one by one, each one sort of struggling with unique and very localized conditions, which resulted in a whole bunch of separate courtyards to try to deal with natural light issues in the individual classrooms. spread out in a willy-nilly fashion. It produces a sort of an educational culture, which is really what's been on Jack and Carrie's mind more than anything. It's very diffuse and sends people around far from each other over the course of the day. There's not the kind of supportive, interactive, collaborative work that one would hope in a school of this nature. This is the lower level you're seeing here. The shops are down in this area here. There are a couple of support areas unrelated to the school is effectively, although team locker rooms down in here. But the sort of ghettoizing of the shop down at the lower levels has been problematic in the way that this is particularly conceived. But I guess I want to underline again the real challenge that we all face. And when we went into the master plan effort, it was absolutely everybody. I think the building committee, Gilbane, in our office, and we do an awful lot of renovation work at schools. We have no particular vested interest in it going in either direction. But we fully expected that the conclusion would be that we would recommend renovate as new because the building is so big. And we assumed, great, you've got what lots of schools don't have, which is space. And over time, just the particular mechanics of the way that the state reimburses and provides limitations on reimbursement for the town in dealing with existing buildings, the particular characteristics of this school, and ironically, in the end of the day, this extraordinarily large building at 155,000 square feet, the state would tell you that that's a building designed for 860 students. You have less than 600 there now. Your 8-year enrollment projection says that you will have 601 over that period of time. So we are confronted with the task of renovating or demolishing portions of the building to try to get to a more reasonable square footage, or paying the upkeep and maintenance and energy costs associated with the building for 860 students. I mean, you really have a 600-student school and is really hamstringed in many different ways. So, fortuitously, the committee managed to discover the possibility of a piece of property right up the street in Killingworth Turnpike, which is just such an extraordinary opportunity and maybe a one-time opportunity that we have to consider this kind of improvement for the Morgan School. Again, many of you know this, about a quarter mile up the road on Killingworth, so we would be on the same side of the street, the Indian River bisecting the site as well. This is a little bit of the corner of the Peters complex here, the football field, so we're immediately adjacent to it. And the property consists of about 35 acres. It extends from the south to the north, off to the east, again with a river in the middle. And the opportunity to develop it in such a way that the school proper and its support spaces and parking can be located to the west, and the athletic fields, practice fields to the east, with immediate access to the the Peters complex further to the east. The other thing, well, amongst the many sort of positive characteristics of the site, the long exposure on Killingworth gives you an opportunity to make multiple entrances onto the site and control service access, parent access, bus access, separate access for the public on weekends using the auditorium and gymnasium in ways that can be managed in lots of different fashions. We happen to show 3 entrances at present. A principal entrance in the center of the site here, with a drive that gives access to those who are visiting the school on a regular basis, dropping off bus drop-off. We have another access here, so students and faculty who might be arriving can bypass that whole process. The 3rd entrance at the far end, which will provide access to the gymnasium and its own separate drop-off, its own separate parking. Gymnasium, again, you'll see this in more detail in a moment, located at the north end of the building. An appropriate service access with the ability to be able to conceal that from the street so it's not unsightly to in this residential neighborhood, and provide the necessary clearance for large vehicles to get on and off the site. There are, because of the presence of the wetlands, there are setbacks specific to wetlands and other factors that we know a good deal about, not everything, but part of the process was engaging a civil engineer who did a careful study of that. So our siting of the building is driven by that at this point. Now, many of you will be aware of the fact that the Clinton Nurseries, of course, occupies all of this space and this property over here. There is one residential property that sits right here, right basically at the center of the site. And we didn't set out to do this. Our initial approach was the assumption that over time, the various parties involved would see to it that residential property would be incorporated into this. But as it turned out, the logical place to site the building is some distance away from where that residence occurs. And again, this could be open to further development by the architect, whoever that might be over time. The building could shift further north, perhaps a little bit to the east, not too much because of the wetlands limitation. But certainly our position remains that it would be in everybody's best interest for that residential property to be acquired in support of this new school. Having said that, there's a kind of a crazy possibility of that not happening, and the residents remaining and the building moves a little bit further north, and it's sort of wrapping the residents. I would consider that a lose-lose situation for everybody. I think the school would suffer for it. Certainly the property owner would not presumably favor that arrangement at all. Nothing but lower their property values. But that's the basic lay of the land. Present. Again, the Indian River is presently breached by what I'll call a land bridge, which is a big sort of steel culvert that exists here. And we have the possibility of improving upon that. We wouldn't propose an elaborate bridge, but we would make this sufficient to take emergency vehicles that could pass a bollard and hop a curb and go on this route to be able to access the play fields here. That would be the principal means of accessing play fields for emergency. There are grading conditions along here that make that less desirable, although there is a secondary entrance from this point as well. This portion of the site is adequate to support play fields and across two soccer/lacrosse fields, 6 tennis courts, baseball diamond, softball diamond, and a football practice field, which is what you see here. Again, some of that has to be fleshed out in more detail as more information is learned about setbacks and soil conditions and grading and that sort of thing. But in general, it seems rather promising to support that. I'll jump right to a visual image, which I don't normally start with, but just sort of putting it all on the table, we'll sort of talk just a little bit about some characteristics that we need to get into the bones of things. Fundamentally, we're in a residential neighborhood. We take that seriously. We want to produce a building that has a scale that's appropriate to it. Again, you'll see hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll all be convinced that a multi-story building just makes enormous sense for Morgan School, way more than a single-story building. And we focused our energies, and again, you'll hear this over and over again from me over the next few minutes here. Our focus has been on doing the most efficient building that we could possibly imagine for the Morgan School. Compact, efficient, minimal perimeter area, minimal roof area. We take it as a challenge. There are lots of different ways to design schools. Lord knows there are many of them out there. And many of them could be wonderful from an educational point of view, and that's, of course, the fundamental objective here. But one real challenge we took at this phase is how do you design a building that is most cost-effective, most energy-conserving, most resource-conserving, as one could possibly imagine, to serve the long-term interests of the town. So I'm putting this out there because I want you to understand the scale of it. In this building, which again is only somewhat less, 20,000 square feet less than the existing Morgan School, we have an auditorium, roughly equivalent in size to the auditorium that you have today. We have a double gym, we have cafeteria, library, a full array of support facilities of comparable size to exist in Morgan School. And I'm going to describe to you how we were able to take away 20,000 square feet. It's not insignificant in the process of accommodating the program. So the most efficient footprint for a building of any type, particularly this, is one that's square or rectangular. As you develop wings and courtyards and extensions and elements that are proceeding, one is increasing the amount of perimeter area that you have to heat and maintain. A simple volume is clearly the least expensive. So fundamentally, we started out with a square, and it distorted a little bit into a rectangle as we addressed some specific needs. And the goal is to take the spaces that have no need for outside light, place them internal to the building, and in fact press them below grade to some degree. Auditorium, gymnasium, shop type spaces, areas that in fact not only don't need windows, but in fact don't want windows. And it's silly to make big, tall walls for auditoriums that are just generating heat loss for you out of the ground when they can be submerged partly below grade in ways that means that the temperature differential between inside and the earth on the other side is 10, 20 degrees and not 50, 60, 70 degrees. So not to dwell on that, but you'll hear me speak about that many times over the course. So, I've turned you, by the way, relative to the site plan here. So, Killingworth Turnpike out here, that entry drive right here. Family would arrive, buses would arrive, the major drop-off would occur front in that loop here. One would enter through a canopy into an entry courtyard space. The entire building is fully handicap accessible. There happens to be some steps here, but there are ramps on either side that allow for disabled to enter. The principal entrance to the school is here, and the program distribution is meant to support all of that. So administration in this area, there's the faculty lounge, and yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about all the specifics of the plan, although I'm very happy to afterwards. We have plans over here. We'll go through that in more detail. But fundamentally, again, the spaces that require natural light are held to the perimeter. The spaces that don't want natural light are held to the center. This is a two-story gymnasium space. This is the cafeteria and main lobby. I should also mention that there are separate entrances on the east and west that provide not only an important emergency egress, so there are ways to get out of the building. This is a particularly important one, giving access, you'll see in a moment, for the gymnasium spaces out to the play fields, and then additional access from parking areas. But one enters through a vestibule, passes the administration. There's an opportunity to go directly into a sloped floor auditorium. We have two versions of this. One that we championed early on was a tiered seating arrangement. Your building committee and many of you felt that there's a real sentiment and fondness for the kind of sloped seating arrangement that you have. So we turned back to that arrangement. So that's essentially what you're seeing here, sloping floor, aisle-type seating to a stage down here, but that's sloping down such that this is now quite high ceiling. But now in the event that there are special events going on in the auditorium, one can egress out and now take advantage of the, I'll call it lobby/cafeteria space to support the intermissions and events occurring before and after things occurring in the auditorium. So the concept behind the cafeteria, which you see here, is kind of a food court one. There is the kitchen area and all the kitchen support and servery area here. So students arrive, pick up their food, pass out, sit in this now open area. These are low walls around the perimeter, open to the adjacent space. Again, I'll remind you all, this is one design. Some of you might feel, gee, we need a cafeteria with walls. And over time, it may come to pass that that sentiment prevails, and this isn't what has been discussed about today. But an open space that has, again, the advantage of serving as an overflow lobby for events in the auditorium. But you're now at this level, and as one looks down, now the gymnasium is down at a level below. So in effect, as you're here, you're on a balcony looking to the space below, where there, in this particular configuration, is a single basketball court, oriented as you see, with retractable bleachers, back up against the underside of this balcony when not in use. But imagine you have a major basketball event involving your girls' basketball team, which is rather successful these days, and where there are tribal and you have a huge turnout. At present, I don't know what the actual numbers are, but in terms of square footage, and I'll go over this in a little bit more detail later. In fact, I'm going to cut to the quick. You increase your capacity for spectator events by somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% in the version that we're proposing here. And we imagine, and that's, we're just talking about people in bleachers. It doesn't include folks sitting up in here looking out over balconies, folks sitting up in here on these walkways looking through glass or even retractable glass perhaps, looking into the space below. So we really think of this gym as being a celebratory event. It's not something just the athletic folks are pushed off in the corner of the school. They're really, the activities are going on there really integral to the life of the school. Okay, so other support spaces here. We have custodial storage, auto shop space, other things happening at this level. What we've tried to do is work with Jack and Carrie on an idea. What aspects of the traditionally, well, let's call it the STEM program, old days vocational training, can be taken out of the sort of ghettoized basement brought upstairs. So we've done that as much as we can. A good example would be the Culinary Arts Program, which is located right here. And we see that as having a sort of a public face that can actually support events that occur in the cafeteria. The Child Development Program comes out of that basement, occupies an prominent space right here. Families who are riding with children can live park along the front. There's a ramp access to a separate door for that child development space immediately at the end of this. So, and the support of the culinary arts and the child development program is all occurring very visibly in the life of the school. Okay, so that's entry level. If we go down, you'll see all this in section in a moment, so you'll understand a little bit better how it works relative to grade. But if one enters the school and descends down one of 4 stairs that occur around the perimeter here, you come to that lower level. Now, you're seeing the lower level now of the auditorium with its descending floor down into this space. Here is the stage. I'm going to talk about the scene shop here in a moment. But there is shop space around the perimeter here. We have light wells in such a way where there is natural light admitted to them, but most shop space doesn't want windows that are down low. You like a lot of wall space up to a certain height. You put equipment in benches, and it's just much more efficient to work that way. And then there are certain kinds of shops, again, like the film editing and video graphics and that sort of thing, that don't want any natural light at all. So they're terrific candidates to put down here. We're proposing a very flexible arrangement where there might even be just, it's really just a concrete floor, an exposed structure, and a couple of partitions, and ways to use this will be very flexible with the evolution of the STEM program over the next 20, 30, 40 years. The locker complex is located down at this level, boys and girls, equally sized, coaches' offices. And now you're seeing the gymnasium configured in a different way. There is a retractable partition here, which allows for the courts to occur side by side. So in that previous drawing you saw, the basketball court was oriented this way, and with game lines one could do this quite readily. But day in, day out, you would have 2 full-size regulation basketball courts with a retractable partition between them that would provide privacy for these 2 sides. I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about the square footage of that in a moment. And let me just finally mention, again, I described in the site plan, weekends, evenings, special events involving the public, access over here, ramp access, steps going down to the intermediate level, entering into vestibules here, entering in, descending down further in ramps, having direct access into the gymnasium. And one can control that independent of the coming and going of all for the regular school day. Okay, now that was lower level. You had seen entry level. We go 1 entry level up. We're at that top level now, the classroom level. So we think of this level as kind of a loft level where all the necessary sort of more traditional academic classrooms would be located. And we've worked with your school staff in understanding all the needs of that. At this point, it's being approached somewhat generically. There'll be much more detail coming further. But fundamentally, there are generally used classrooms, there are science classrooms, there's an open science court here, as we describe it, where it's possible to come out, and this is the one area of the building which is now open to the sky in the center here, provides natural light for these classrooms. Jack made reference to the different conceptions about your guidance program and college counseling program and how that all works in conjunction with the so-called learning commons. So this is in some ways, I'll draw a line around this and describe it as the library, but in fact it's many things. And this is an information center that has many different opportunities to address students with different styles of learning. And those who need extreme privacy in order to work, there are special rooms that are set aside for them to work privately. There's also, for those who have the Starbucks mentality, one can sit out in an open area and work in a kind of a reading room here. It's part of sort of a vital kind of learning center as well. There's an open space here and skylight up above that emits natural light into the space. It's not kind of again, some further discussion about windows in a moment. So I'll move quickly through these sections, just so how you understand this again. So now, south is that way, entry drive is here. Here's that entry court. One's cutting a section through the auditorium here, you begin to see how it becomes depressed into the ground, this particular location. classrooms up above. The cafeteria and lobby here with the lockers below. There's that balcony I spoke of overlooking the two-story gymnasium here. So visitors can stand here and look out. Bleachers retract from here. One can, at halftime, walk up those bleachers, come to the cafeteria area. There could be an opportunity for concessions to be sold there, and lots of activity around the perimeter of the gym. And this is the lower press courtyard on the north side, in which visitors coming to the gym would access that for non-school events. Section, this is cut 90 degrees to that. So in this version, Killingworth Turnpike is over here, the river is over here. Here's the basic diagram of that three-story structure. So this is really a better illustration of what's more typical grade on the Killingworth Turnpike side. These are the shops that don't want natural light. These are things like the ministerial offices and other things. You'll see in a moment how those were classroom arrangements here. And I have some comments to make about the attic in a moment here. And then finally, that open courtyard I spoke about, the science courtyard, open to the sky. Last of the section. So this is cut through the lobby. Now I'm looking south. So I flipped around. There's Indian River. There's Killingworth Turnpike. Same diagram illustrating the classroom wings. We happen to be looking through a stairwell here. Here is this two-story space, which is the lobby at the lower level, and an overlook for portions, at least the public portions of the learning commons up above. And this is all very premature, but we're exploring ideas about doing a double glazed skylight system, which would act as a heat exchanger, so one could emit heat during the wintertime and capture that, distribute it around the school, use it as a ventilation source in the summer. So going back to a stretch of the elevation here, I just want to talk a second about windows. So one of the interesting things about the tension between the 1950s era modern school buildings that were built over and over and over again throughout the entire country, and people's general distaste for them now, for the most part, and what has to be acknowledged as the teaching staff, the faculty's great appreciation for the approach to windows that those buildings brought. There's a reason those buildings were built so many times. For in terms of the quality of the light in the teaching environment, they're terrific. The teachers all love this extensive ribbon of glass that goes from wall to wall, from sill height up to the ceiling level. And it's commonly associated with a kind of a modernist language. Many of you or many people find that distasteful in lots of ways. So we fundamentally tried to address that challenge here. How does one make a building that addresses that real great benefit that it provides in terms of the quality of the teaching environment, not to mention natural daylighting, which is a terrific source of energy savings, balanced against the concerns for heat conservation. At the same time as glazing may be a benefit from daylighting, it's obviously not a terrific insulator. So one wants to use it where it's most needed and not use it where it's not much needed. So again, that arrangement of this three-story building, elements that don't need natural light placed at a subterranean or half-buried level, occurring in places down below, where some natural light is needed, areaways created in order to bring light into it. Punched openings developed in a masonry base that tries to sort of capture some of the traditional qualities of a tripartite, as we say, construction with these windows. So these are things like administrative office spaces and other spaces that don't require quite extensive ribbon glazing. But then the classroom areas are seen as just a band of glass that goes all the way around. And one has the opportunity, who knows, in 10, 20, 30 years, the needs for classroom arrangements, you take down an inexpensive metal stud and gypsum board partition, you can reconfigure that upper floor, you have windows everywhere. Frankly, it's a model that comes from a developer sensibility. They build office buildings this way, again, because it has terrific flexibility. I think we're looking at you need to make an investment for a long term here. This isn't a so we would do it differently, but the concept's basically the same. So aerial view, I don't consider this a terribly flattering view of the building, but it tells an important story about the basic organization of it. Again, 2 pitched roof wings, 3 pitched roof sections running laterally, relatively minimal amount of flat roof area. Again, I'll touch on that in a second. There's that open courtyard down to the science room. So the pitched roofs accomplish many things. They do cost a little more money. They obviously have a much better track record in terms of longevity. One of the reasons this whole project is happening right now is you're all facing a $3 to $4 million roof replacement project. We're looking at making investments to absolutely minimize that in the future. So roofs are important from that point of view. We have an arrangement that allows us to hide rooftop mechanical equipment, which is the most economical way to handle much of that. But you don't have, it being a residential neighborhood, you're not seeing stacks of that everywhere. So that's an important feature as well. And then finally, Clinton should be given the opportunity to explore whatever options there are for sustainable design. Our approach so far has been to use all what are called passive sustainable design features. Good insulation, thoughtful planning, materials that are inherently energy conserving, highly insulated building, things that are just your basic things that don't cost a whole lot more money, in some cases don't cost any more money, and have no moving parts and no particular operating expenses, but result in significant, in fact, dramatic cost energy reduction. There's a secondary tier of things one can get into. Geothermal and thermal mass storage systems and solar panels, which are, in many cases, make terrific sense. Sometimes they make sense when they have federal or government subsidies. Sometimes they don't make sense. And that judgment has to be made on sort of a really hard-nosed kind of dollars and cents basis. But should it come to pass that a solar array makes sense for you, we configured this in the manner that you see here, so that these are all direct south-facing sections that could receive solar panels, and the roof angle has been calculated for the optimal angle for this latitude. So if you did install solar panels there, there's no compromise. So just a quick review of some of the square footage issues here. And again, to emphasize our great focus on conserving square footage. Graphically, the footprint of your existing buildings, the courtyards that exist in it. The footprint's 133,850 square feet. That's the equivalent footprint we have today. That's as much roof as you have to maintain today. That's why you're facing $3 million. That's the roof that you'll face going forward, and many other features in terms of purchasing the bricks and mortar that make up this building. That's what we have here today. So you might rightly say, no, wait a minute, this smaller building, how is it being made so small? What are we giving up to do so? This is a comparison graphically of the usable area of the two buildings. 154,360 for the existing building, 134,750 for the new building. So there's roughly a 20,000 square foot differential there. So where did that 20,000 square feet come from? Two places, basically. One, just plain building efficiency. And they're just miles of quarters in your existing building. In many spaces, they're very wasteful. They're just planned in a fashion that's efficient. So right out of the gate, we're able to get some significant square footage savings there. And then there are, because it is a school that effectively is designed for 860 students, you have way more classrooms than the state would normally say is appropriate for 600 students. And consequently, there are 10 fewer classrooms. There are roughly, when I say classrooms, I'm going to generally use, not science, not art, not music, not shops, just the English, history, math. 10 fewer. There are 40 at Morgan School today. There are 30 in our proposed design. So we've worked with Jack and Kerry on that. We all feel that, they all feel that that's a responsible number to go forward with. And if you do the math, it works out 20 students per student per class. 600 students, 30 classrooms. That is assuming that no one's in gym, no one's in cafeteria, no one's at shop, no one's at art, no one's in music. So you can see that just there's a reason the state creates these numbers, and there's a reason why 155,000 square foot just remains inappropriate for your school. Building envelope efficiency, so I spoke about roof. Again, comparison to roof area, comparing roof area. 133,000 for existing building, 53,000 for the new building. More importantly, virtually 133,000 square feet of that, I call it flat roof. That's not technically correct. There are portions of it that are pitched, but it's all what's called a membrane roof. It's a 20-year roof, and it all needs to be replaced in roughly 20-year intervals. And it's the kind of roof one struggles with all the time. The comparable area that we have in the new building is this. We're down to 15,000 square foot of so-called flat membrane roof. Difficult to avoid altogether with rooftop mechanical equipment and that sort of thing. 89% reduction in that. So the $3 million gauntlet you're going through in 20-year increments is reduced dramatically. The present planning of the Morgan School, because it was done as a series of additions, is just foolish and complex. This is not a, it's our best guess at the number of different roof levels that exist at Morgan School today. Each dot represents a different change in height. 26 on the existing roof, not including subsections and all. 9 proposed for the new building. If one calculated the lineal footage of flashing area for all the intersections between different roof levels, almost 2 miles of flashing, graphically illustrated by this line here. It's really an estimate, a very conservative one, 10,000 lineal feet of changes of roof level, which is where all the leaks happen. They don't happen in the middle of the roof, they happen at intersections. We go down to 1,600 square feet, that's a pretty darn accurate number. That's a 93% reduction in all of those very vulnerable areas for roof leak. And then finally, perimeter wall area. Okay, if one takes the existing Morgan School, takes all the perimeter wall, unwraps it, calls it 30 feet high and runs it across graphically, that's what's illustrated there. Every one of that square footage that you see there is almost uninsulated area that is just giving up energy to the outside environment, which you're paying an enormous annual cost in heating the building. We're reducing that by 47% to reduce it down to the area that you see here by virtue of the more efficient diagram. So it's difficult to talk about real dollars in terms of, gee, what is the actual dollar savings, but anybody can see that when you reduce the area that dramatically and you build an insulated wall versus uninsulated wall, there's just got to be dramatic savings there. So again, concerns about the square footage of existing amenities that I know are of all value to you. We heard many, many times how important the auditorium is to the school and to the community. And how it was sort of a non-starter to think about significantly reducing the size of that. The state will reimburse you for 1/2 of the enrollment of the school, 300 students. And there was a shout down on that. That's something that you all can't tolerate. It's a terrific amenity for Clinton. We just have to step up to the plate and find a way to do that. So here's the footprint of the existing auditorium and stage area at 8,900 square feet. Right now we're proposing almost equivalent, 8,775 square feet. I will say, we've apportioned it differently. Here is the house area, the seating area. Here is the stage area, both of which are a little smaller than the existing. And here is a scene shop, theater prep area, storage area, which you do not have here today, and is a serious problem, serious deficiency in the building. Right now, sets are being constructed in the hallways. There are significant fire hazards. Your fire officials have noted it many times. It's a constant struggle. And so our recommendation to you all is if you can live with a slightly slower seating count, that take the square footage that you have, distribute it differently, make sure you have an adequate scene shop. Again, referendum day is not a judgment about that. All this is one approach to it. You may all say, no, that's unacceptable, we have to find a different way of doing it, and so be it. But just so you know, if you should vote to approve 135,000 square feet, you're not voting necessarily for a smaller auditorium. Gymnasium, again, enormous sentiment about the 2 gyms. The state doesn't explicitly limit you to 1 gym, they just have their square foot limitations, and it's based for a 600 student high school, which is a very low enrollment, that it's quite unusual to find 2 full-size gyms. So comparing what we're proposing to what exists, here's what exists today. The larger gym where most of your special events occur, the practice gym here. So this is an either-or scenario here. So here's what our gym looks like here. Here's what it looks like in that configuration. Again, turning it 90 degrees so there's an easier comparison here. Here it is in the practice configuration, 2 regulation-sized basketball courts with a partition closed. In the event that there's a special thing occurring and lots of spectators, the retractable partition is pulled back, the orientation, of course, turned around. So we've increased the seating capacity, the spectator capacity by 47%, even though the square footage of the building is now 15% less than it was before. So you save money by building less, and you get more of a facility for your spectators.
Dave, I can't read the square footage
No.
versus what versus what.
You're out of focus again.
Any better?
Well, you
It's
went
pretty
over
small.
the existing.
I'm happy to share all these with you.
15,940 versus 13,700.
So the total square footage, 15,960 for the combined total area of the two gyms, 13,700 for the combined total area of the two here. The larger gym is 9,310, I believe. And the larger of the two here, our new gym is 13,700. So when I say there's a 47% increase, I'm comparing this to this. So when you have a special event, here's where your events are taking place. That's the limitation of your spectator capacity, and that's what you would have going. Okay, cafeteria, no change. And your existing cafeteria, from all accounts, works fine. I believe you have 3 lunch shifts, and it's not unheard of for some schools to do 4. It gets really problematic when you start doing 5. But that, at your enrollment, that's not going to be an issue. So you have 4,670 today. We're showing 4,690. That's essentially the same. Different configuration, but essentially the same square footage. And then classrooms. Again, now the existing Morgan School has a variety of classroom sizes. They range from, on average, 740 to 840. There are a few classrooms that are somewhat bigger than that. And of course, the art and music and others are quite big, and that's not part of this discussion. But your typical used classrooms are just open areas, as you see. We've had some discussions with your staff, and there have been different thoughts about ways to handle the teacher needs and faculty offices, and that's evolved into a diagram that you see here, which involves a kind of a shared space with some sliding doors and faculty offices that allow a faculty person to have a presence in the classroom without necessarily having to camp up right inside of it. But all of that is way down the road. The purpose of this is really to just illustrate to you that we have an average class size of 775, which is roughly in the ballpark of your average size at Morgan today. So I'm getting close to the end here. Just coming back to it, I want to just touch on 2 other things I have mentioned. One of them practical, one of them fun. This dormer window you see here, this is just bringing natural light into one particular place in kind of a special way. It's the only dormer that exists in the building that's been conceived at this point. But keep this in your mind. This is something that could become the ingredient of future expansion. Let's say that the town of Clinton, the enrollment projections are inaccurate, and lo and behold, wonderful things happen, and your town population grows, particularly your youthful population. Suddenly, you've got way more students, and you just tore down a 155,000 square foot school. You built a smaller one, and what do you do with these new students? And wasn't that a foolish thing to do? So one has to consider, how does one deal with expansion? The most common way of dealing with that is just to add on. And that's what produces a Morgan school over a long period of time, and often results in really poor adjacencies and modular buildings getting clubbed on that are seen as short-term that never go away. What we would propose, in the interest of minimizing the effect on site work, not doing foundation work, absolutely minimizing the effect of new structural work, is that the building be built in such a way that anticipates essentially what you've all done in your residences for many years, which is capture your attic space and expand on the roof and put some living space up there. So that dormer I showed you a picture of, if one did it on the side elevations here and here, created a kind of a shed eyebrow dormer with windows along the perimeter. One doesn't impact the footprint at all, but extend the stairs up to this so-called attic level, and in the most dramatic of scenarios, which is kind of hard to imagine, one has an additional 10 classrooms in here for a potential increase in enrollment of 200, 250 students or so. That's pretty hard to imagine. So one could do some approximation of this, but I illustrate this to suggest to you that again, I think you shouldn't be concerned that by building a smaller building, you're locking yourself into some potential problem in the future without an ability to address it. And lastly, there was some sentiment from the building committee about having a tower. The old Morgan School had a tower. The name of your newsletter is the tower. And I've been sort of brutal on everybody and saying we can't spend the money on the tower, it's too expensive, it doesn't serve any purpose, you can't use it, it has fire stairs, and et cetera, et cetera. So my tower is just a small gesture, but it's one you experience down at ground level. So everyone who comes and goes from the school every day comes by what in effect is a virtual tower here. You all have seen the bell and the stone plaque that exists adjacent to the auditorium. Those are sort of wonderful artifacts in the history of Clinton. Wonderful to incorporate those in some way. That's one idea. There may be others that can come in. But that's our tower, essentially a stone-lined thing. So you're seeing the inside of a piece of the tower, if not spending a $250,000 tower that serves no purpose. So lastly, I'll end on this image, and I'll have the boards up over here, and opportunities for questions as we go forward. I think Maureen's going to speak a little bit about some of the costs here in a second. But towards the imagery here, again, the building committee asked us very early on in the master plan phase, would we provide some images of what the building would look like, and I resisted and resisted and resisted. And my feeling is just that it absolutely has to happen very organically out of the process, and you have to understand what's unique to Clinton, but more importantly, just understand that the elevations and the look of the building is just, it's a problem-solving exercise in sort of an old New England kind of Yankee way. You know, it's like building agricultural structures or something. You want to build them with integrity and thoughtfully and frugally and conservatively. And the image of the building sort of derives out of that, with obviously some always paying attention to where you're headed with it. And I'll hesitate to say this was certainly not conceived with any sort of agricultural buildings in mind, but in a lot of ways they share kind of a value system, I suppose. And we're trying to sort of capture the simple sort of integrity that those buildings have. We're trying to speak to some of the characteristics of the New England building in terms of masonry and wood. I will indicate that wood is just such a wonderful material to use in a building of this type, but it does deteriorate. And getting it entirely protected from the elements under roof. There's lots of wood here, but it's never exposed to the elements in a way that would cause it to deteriorate over time. It's always tucked back under overhangs and all. We think those are all the sort of wonderful things that make it feel right for a residential neighborhood and give it a warmth. So there you go. Do you want to take questions now, or do you want to turn to more?
I'm more on Rubo. What I'm doing with the handout now is our cost estimate breakdown. So what does this all cost? We took the information in my meeting with the building committee and with David, ran through a pretty detailed cost estimate based on conceptual design. And as David mentioned, this is a concept, but based on these areas given in the programs in the building and our experience, we can get a pretty accurate estimate of what costs, what the building might cost. You know, if it stays in this form or similar to this form in size and in quantity, our estimate would be pretty accurate. The top half of the estimate are the building construction costs, which are what we in the industry call hard construction costs of bricks and mortar of the building, which total $51 million. They include two major contingencies: a design contingency, again, because it's a conceptual design, as the design evolves and more detail becomes apparent, those costs are captured in the design contingency. And there's also an escalation factor, because this is proposed to be, if it goes into design in 2012 as planned, construction wouldn't start until 2013, 2014, so the cost escalation is carried to the middle point of construction. So those are factored into this estimate as well. Construction management costs for the management of the construction project. And then a construction contingency to gather any construction issues during the course of construction by the construction manager. Below that are soft costs, which include architectural engineering fees, design fees for consultants, property acquisition costs, business relocation costs as may be required, environmental hazmat costs, and other soft costs such as moving furniture, fixtures, and equipment, technology that gets incorporated into the building. So those are all captured below, and then at the bottom, there's an owner's contingency to capture any owner-related issues for costs. So you can see the estimate is pretty accurate, or pretty involved, and it also includes some contingency because of the early stage of the design. Behind that, and I'll take questions at the end, I'm just running through this, is the construction cost breakdown by major discipline. These are just strictly construction costs. Again, bricks and mortar costs. And then finally, the last page has the breakdown of the cost sharing by the town and the state. Total construction costs, as was mentioned earlier, are $64.7 million. Clinton has a reimbursement rate from the state of 36%. There is a space penalty based on square footage of 15%, so it's actually a net reimbursement rate of 30.6%. So that breaks down to $19.1 million of state share and town share of $45.6 million. Those are the numbers in a nutshell. For any questions?
Is it actually a second,
For the new building is included. It's in the construction estimate, probably under site services or site design.
under what?
Under the site section, it will be broken out separately. If you look at site construction costs, the $6.4 million number,
And that also includes fields
that
and.
includes field development, yeah, those fields that David showed, yeah, exactly. Site construction being the development of the site to prepare for the school building, parking, the fields, septic, drainage.
Where is that on your?
If you go on the second page,
Oh, page three. Got it.
it's total. It's in the total of the hard construction costs.
I'm gonna wait a few more minutes, we just have one more part of the presentation, and then you can ask questions of Laura or David or committee members, okay? Thank you.
So before the questions, the building committee asked me to prepare a conclusion. The prospect of relocating and building a new facility for the Morgan School presents an exceptionally rare opportunity for the town of Clinton. Without question, the decision before our town will be talked about for decades to come. Lying before us is the opportunity to overhaul the educational environment of our flagship school. We will be able to do it without educational interruption and offset the project's cost with the sale and revenue generated from a property adjacent to Shoreline's premier shopping destination. 5 years after the American Civil War, Charles Morgan, with a gift to our town, endowed the school ultimately bearing his name. Not only was it a gift of hope and opportunity, it was a statement of what he thought to be perhaps the greatest asset he could give to his hometown, a proper home to educate its youth. And here we are, close to 150 years later, and circumstances over the past 60 years have required the town to add pieces onto our secondary school to serve our needs. The result is a sprawling conglomerate of these 60 years of circumstance fused together into an incoherent design. Today, we are left with a hallway-heavy maze of classrooms that has 26 separate roof lines, never meant for longevity in a New England climate. It contains many expensive renovating pitfalls. If we were to assume all these risks and pay to eliminate them, we would still be left with merely a renovated version of the same inefficient design. The building's original California design, popular in the 50s, was conceived and built in an era which didn't require consideration of energy costs in New England, never mind a $5 a gallon environment. Ultimately, the argument for renovation hinged on one dimension. It might be cheaper. The town study has shown that even that isn't true. And worse, we would cut ourselves off from any additional long-term tax revenue to ease that cost. In sinking more money into this structure, quite simply, we risk spending more, maintaining more, and getting less. Our town has one of the most storied educational traditions in the country. Our grade 4-5 school, Abraham Pearson, is named after the first rector and instructor of the very first classes of Yale. Held right here at the Congregational Church Parsonage on our Main Street in 1701. Fittingly, Yale and Morgan share the colors of that church, blue and white. The conceptual design process, approved 10-1 by attendees at a town meeting last March, is meant to give us a cost estimate of the type of structure we need to overcome the shortcomings of our current building. Many Clinton residents have participated in community input events, and what was shared was included in our cost estimate with efficiency and reason. This price is for a building designed for us. It is a coherent design, little wasted space, superior functionality to the current building, a warm, rich learning environment, and designed to bring cohesiveness to the Morgan community. While the required number of classrooms, labs, instructional spaces, and the core elements to educate our students for the 21st century were given the first consideration, the feedback from the town revealed 2 program items that are, for us, cultural necessities. First, the town of Clinton has heavy participation in sports, and the Morgan School has a rich tradition of success and championships. Included in this cost is a 2-gym layout, but in addition to what we have now, a new building would free us from our current fixed cinder block wall design. The new location will also save us money, as many teams will no longer require busing to the Peters Complex for practices, and the chosen property has significantly more field space. The second cultural necessity is the great value we place on and pride we take in our music, choral, and theater programs. This cost estimate includes a full-size auditorium with proscenium stage opening to which we are accustomed, and, as noted earlier, the addition of an adequate space for set construction. A new building will provide us with greater functionality in both these highly valued spaces. We should be proud of the unique qualities, history, and traditions of the Morgan School, and the Morgan School deserves a building that reflects its school and town traditions. After 2.5 years of study, the building committee has overwhelmingly recommended that we give the town a solution that is less expensive and yields the greatest results. Relocating and building a new Morgan is not only the most cost-effective solution, but may prove to be one of the proudest moments in Morgan School history. Our humble request this evening is that each of you consider the tremendous benefits of this project for the town. Respect our recommendation, move it forward, and empower the citizenship to decide if this solution is best for Clinton. Thank you all very much.
That concludes our presentation, and if any of the board members would like to ask questions now, you could. So, hold on.
I have a question, yes. A bit of the initial presentation was based on the potential income / tax revenue from the existing site of Morgan School. As I recall, the Board of Education paid for a appraisal about a year and a half ago. I just wondered how that appraisal came in, and to know that no financial institution will accept an appraisal that's more than 6 months old. So what was it appraised for?
The appraisal was paid for out of Board of Education dollars,
yeah.
and the appraisal came in at $5.5 million.
And that was about a year ago?
Year and a half, I think.
Year and a half, yeah, I think it was like in November.
Yeah. And what was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
The state will not accept an appraisal that's that old either.
Nobody accepts it.
Conditionally, with the sale, the potential sale of the property and reimbursement for the property that is considered to be purchased, an appraisal will have to be done within 60 days prior or after the state approves the project, which could be a year from now.
Right, and that also, I mean, that's just.
Right, which in theory, the way the economy is starting to go, would bring the number up.
I have 2 more brief questions. This would be, in terms of septic and DEP mandated system, and I know to study for that, to monitor, you have to study the groundwater for the five highest months from February to May. And I understand this permit takes 2 years. How can the cost estimates be evaluated without the completion of these studies?
Fundamentally, for the moment, we have budgeted for the potential of having an on-site treatment system, which would be the worst-case scenario. We are optimistic that a subsurface conventional system, even though albeit under jurisdiction of DEP, can be put in. One of the engineers we're dealing with is optimistic, but We just feel it would be inappropriate to count on that likelihood. Therefore, I believe 1.4 million has been budgeted for an on-site treatment system.
One more question.
Sure.
It was clearly laid out that what we were presented tonight was a conceptual design. That's what this architect was hired for. How can we be voting, how can we put this to referendum and get these numbers on something that is conceptual, not reality-based?
I'll have more answer that.
Unfortunately, the method that we have to fund the project, the state requires local approval first. It requires us to do this quite often, and we do this frequently for various towns around the state, where we have to do a conceptual estimate. You have to engage in our conceptual design, just to be able to give you something to vote on. If not, so this gives us a good foundation for us to create an estimate. We have a lot of historical information. We've done several schools, hundreds of schools, over 100 schools in the state, 38 in New Haven alone, where we programmed this and constructed them, where we have very accurate cost information data that we've used to construct this estimate. So we're confident that, given the information that we have and the concept presented, that if this were to go forward, you would fall within this estimate, given the contingencies also that are included in the estimate, which is why we carry it.
So actually line-by-line specs have not been laid out with the floors, windows.
No, but we know, what a typical possible type floor has, so we carry the cost of those items.
So much is square foot.
Right, and finishes, masonry, that type of thing. So, again, the estimate is based on the design as much as it is based on historical information that we have.
And how often do you come in within range of your estimate, your presentation to the final outcome of the building?
When building costs remain the same, and material costs remain the same, we always do.
But we're looking 7 years ahead of time.
Escalation, that's why it's escalation.
Escalation is built in.
So what is the usual relationship between the estimate of cost and the final outcome?
Usually, when we work within the estimate that we
Better
have.
be lower.
It has to be.
The referendum is for
I want
X
to jump in. When this was presented initially, and David was Bob, they used the word conservative. They didn't use the word conservative as we're used to using the word conservative. Their use of the word conservative was to say they tended to stay on the high side to make sure that we had enough to cover what additional costs maybe. That's why you see the contingencies in the budget. We want to make sure, that's why the $1.45 million for the septic was left in, even though there's high confidence that we will be able to do a conventional system. We don't want to take the chance that something happens and we're not able to. We want to make sure that whatever's in the building, and I've said this many times, whatever's in this conceptual project plan covers the cost. We cannot go back to the town for more money. Bottom line in the story.
Well, haven't we just backed out a $500,000 building to the town? That maintenance building, isn't that gone now out of this?
Yeah, we
So
we
now
had-
it's a town project, right? So the town has to fund that.
Probably a lot easier to do that way.
Well, it might be a lot easier to do, but, it was in this cost estimate, now it's out of the cost estimate, but it's still gonna be paid for.
There's options, Doug, that we looked at that are outside of this to do that without actually impacting this budget.
I just want to speak to that question a little bit.
Why was the maintenance facility taken out? Because that is required to be able to maintain the facility.
Right, and I'll discuss that right now. There currently is in the Morgan building a maintenance facility that the maintenance department of the Morgan School, Mike Posey is the head or director of maintenance, he has, I think, 3 men that work under him. And they pretty much do a lot of the maintenance work on all 4 of the school buildings. And we realized at the beginning of the process that we had to provide for that space in the new school. The problem that we ran into is that the state won't reimburse the town to build that space. So if we contract an architect and put it into the building project, we're gonna be paying prevailing rates, and we won't be reimbursed from the state for that part of the project. The other thing is that there is a concern, or there's thoughts that maybe we don't need the maintenance building located at the high school. It could be located at another school, it could be located on town property somewhere else. And there was discussion at our committee about what to do with the maintenance building. we had varying numbers. You know, with the architect's plans, we were looking at $1.5 million for the maintenance facility. We said, no, that's not, the town of Clinton isn't gonna spend that kind of money. Then we were looking at $500,000 for the maintenance building. And then there are also thoughts that a building of, I think we were looking at 5,000 square feet could be constructed for $200,000. So, or less, if you don't have to take trailing rates, and I think the threshold is $400,000. So anyway, there has to be some discussion at the town level about where to put the maintenance facility before we as a building committee make a decision. So we aren't hiding it from anybody. The town will have to build a maintenance facility somewhere. But I think if this referendum gets passed, it's a discussion that has to go on between Board of Education and town as to where that building is built.
I see it as part of the cost of this. I mean,
It's not just for the school, Morgan School, it's for all the schools. So why should they, it's just absorb?
Well, fundamentally, it's a cost to the entire town rather than to this. If we can build it for 30%. Absolutely, but the point being, if we can build it at 30% less by not financing it with this collective project, it's a mistake.
Well, that brings me to my question. My question is this referendum going to be for $64.5 million? Or is it going to be the cost of building a new ordinance? Because there are costs here that you're not addressing, such as the fact that this all began with a problem with Morgan's roof. That hasn't gone anywhere, that hasn't disappeared. That still has to be remediated. And whatever cost that is, you have to add that on to the cost of this.
I don't have the missed portion of the water. Can we do it one at a time?
These are all costs that go into the final bottom line of building a new building. I can understand where you're sorting them out and putting them on different line items, but the difference between having a new school and having an old school includes the maintenance building, it includes putting a new roof on work, it includes paying for that roof after the building is demolished. I don't see any demolition
Why would we put a
costs
new
in
roof
here.
on it if we get approved to build a new building?
Because it's still 7 years until.
No, it's not 7 years.
So maybe the more direct question is, do you have to put the new roof?
No.
Maybe that's a direct question.
Then we need to ask the question, what is the actual cost of repairing the roof on the old Morgan?
Or do you have to?
Because we've been hearing for years that it's $3 million, and if
Probably
it's
closer to
not that,
5
we
now.
need to know that.
Probably closer to 5.
Okay.
But we do have to add that on to what you're asking
Why would we
taxpayers,
spend the money?
because the taxpayers are gonna have to pick up the tab.
Why would we spend the money to fix the roof if it gets approved?
Because haven't we been hearing how desperately all
They've been able to
the
patch
roof
it,
is
keep
at
it going, and
Then why don't we do that?
that's not a long-term solution.
Probably in 7 years, that building will have to have a new roof. Unfortunately, I've walked it, and oddly enough, every time it's in the winter when I do it, it takes hours. It's gigantic. His comment about 5 miles of flashing, I don't know. There's a lot. The issues there, the main body, it's an EPDM rubber membrane roof. The main body of the roof is actually not in terribly bad shape. It's all of the terminations. There had been multiple leaks in the school in the past. They have addressed the vast majority of them. There are repairs. I'm not aware of any active leaking. 7 years, you're 100% right, it would have to be replaced.
Saying, I'm walking around with their buckets in my classrooms and.
Has that happened in the reasonable past, you know?
Giving.
It's been one of the last 6 to 8 years that they've actually been doing it, because they've actually got a program now. The idea is, if we can hold it together, if it passes a referendum, we hold it together, why would you invest $5 million fixing roofs when you get approved to build a new school?
There are no safety issues with the current Morgan School. There may be leaks to the current plant.
There are leaks.
And there's an operating budget, there would be a continuing operating
Right.
budget for the next 4, 5, 6 to 7 years.
Right.
However long it takes to go to construction and get it built so we can transition the kids to the new school.
All
But it's not
I'm
gonna happen
saying is,
instantaneously.
all I'm saying is you have to put forward an actual realistic figure.
It
Not
can't
just
get much more than
wait,
this.
listen, not just this figure of putting up the school. You have to include these ancillary costs. People are not gonna be happy if you say, okay, we're building a new school, this is the money. Oh, by the way, we need another $5 million because we have to demo the.
Carol, please.
We don't have to demo the old one.
Carol, we are not gonna replace the roof on the old Morgan School.
I'm
If we
saying
go ahead with the new school. The new
whenever
school,
he
wait a
is-
minute, please.
Yeah.
The new school, if it's approved at referendum, will be operating, the students will be in there in 2015. That's 2.5 years from now. In that time, we will be able to continue to patch any leaks that occur on the existing Morgan School, like
Right.
we've been doing the last 4, 5,
I've got that.
6, or 8 years.
I've got
There's
that.
no need to replace the roof
I'm just
on the
saying
Morgan School.
that there are other.
Original demolition
going
cost,
from-
they will not sell the property with demolition. Whoever buys the property will inherit that building and have to take care of it.
Can I just clarify,
Them-
right
them
now,
all- them all.
the patching, the expense, the cost of patching the roof, that's being covered in our budget. Maintenance,
Correct.
already in our budget. Those numbers are in our education budget already. So that's not an additional cost on top of what we do every year. Good, how are you? Forward. We have those numbers in the town already, there's nothing extra that's, you know, that we have to do more other than what we're doing already. Right, okay, I just want to make sure.
Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, I'd kind of like to get off this topic and talk more about the financing of this. Have you guys developed a specific timeline as to when you're gonna, if this impact is obviously, as to when you're gonna need money, how much, and how long the project's gonna take?
Kevin's worked on it, we've talked about it, it'll be it'll probably be a couple of bond issues, Kev, correct?
It's gonna have to be more than one, because
It'd
it's
be
a
a couple.
acquisition right away.
Correct. It would be a couple. Worked out the timing of when we would bond money and finance.
I mean, really what you look at in a bond issue, a bond issue has to be paid out within it's like a 24 months. So if you look at the Morgan School and so forth, and let's say it's a 3-year construction, there more than likely is gonna be a large bond issue and a small one at the end.
Well, you're gonna have a land acquisition bond, I would presume, that's gonna be
Well, we could probably pay cash for that right now,
2.2 million?
3.7.
Kind of empties the coffers.
But you have to look at it this way too. I mean, it depends how much it's generating.
No, I'm,
Yeah, I mean, you go negative cash. I mean, you know, right now, if you think about with the economy and so forth, you're not earning a lot on your dollar. You know, the general fund, you might
you wouldn't
earn
be paying much
0.5%.
either.
If you get a bond issue, you're gonna be, or a note, you're gonna be paying twice as much as that. So you gotta look at what the cash flow is, and you don't want the taxpayers to pay more than they should.
Well, there are bond costs, you know,
Oh, yeah, there is,
that
yeah.
are not being included in this.
No, the $64 million has money for additional schools. There are
Yeah, I
additional
was just
schools.
saying, does this assume 3 different issues?
Well, it is, I'm not sure it assumes, it probably assumes more than it needs. So what I'm saying is, it's up to me to make sure when I look at the cash flow projection that's forward on once the project starts, as to, you know, make sure we meet this spending guidelines and bond, if the rates are really good, bond as much as upfront.
Oh, yeah.
But basically what we're gonna end up doing anyway, we might already spend $3-4 million, we're not gonna do the bond issue just at that point in time. We'll do a bond issue, we'll reimburse ourselves, and then
You gotta.
But you're talking about a 2.5-year period from approval to open the door to school?
Correct.
Okay.
And you're gonna get 19, round numbers, in theory, 19 million from the state, which is a reimbursement as you go.
Yeah, it's gonna be up to us to make sure we file paperwork.
Get our paperwork in as you go. They don't give it to you at the end with these type of projects, they do it as you go, as long as you get your EDO forms in, you get your paperwork in.
Their reimbursement is as you spend it, they give you that much, or is
Give
it
a
a
percentage.
payment of the bond?
Percentage.
As you spend it. Okay.
On a large scale project like this, when you have the smaller scale project like roofs and this and that, it's when you have the completion of the project, file your paperwork and you.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to us to make sure we send out paperwork, and we get reimbursed within a month or so, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What kind of property tax is the property from Morgan School and bring in after it's sold as a piece of property?
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
Willie?
All right. Here's a quick and dirty, as I like to say, analysis of the existing property. We had it appraised at $5 million and change, and that includes the building. Or it's the building, it's $5 million and change, and we we've had realtors coming to us already, looking for significantly more just to have the exclusive rights to market that property as is. Okay, bottom line in the story, if you compare, comparable with where Clinton Crossings is across the street, the assessed value, not appraised, per acre assessed value of the Clinton Crossing property, and based on the size of the existing property, would generate $81,113 of taxable revenue just on the land, okay, 1 year. Then you look at the building square footage, the average assessed square footage of Clinton Crossing, and those, the square footage range, because maintenance buildings, et cetera, this and that, they go from 200 down to $120. Really, the average square footage assessed is $140 a square foot. Conservative estimate on the size of building you can put on that property based on our zoning regs, and I think you can go bigger, is 100,000 square foot, where we already have 150,000 square foot building there. Okay, based on 100,000 square feet, assessed value, and this is not appraised, assessed is actually what you generate tax revenue on, would bring in $350,000 on the building. So right now, you're at $430,000 in tax revenue building land. That does not include personal property. Low ball estimate on personal property, talk to my tax assessor, my tax collector, is another $100,000 on an annual basis. So you're in the over $500,000 a year range in revenues. Correct. Right. And that's conservative on the low side, not the high side.
Your appraisal that you guys got, 5.something. Do you recall what the effect of the appraiser assumed the highest investment was? So they assumed the existing building could be used for commercial?
Not the existing building.
That's what I wanted.
Right, no, they didn't assume that.
They did not assume that the value.
No demolition costs, no were included in that, it was just the property with the building was $5 million and change.
But it was not.
No assumptions made as
no
assumptions made as to the disposition of the building.
What kind of money did you demolish the building, $1 million?
No, it's $4 million, but we won't demolish the building. People want to buy it with the building.
It's kind of a wash, you're gonna put $4 million into
It's worth a lot more than that.
It would cost us that to demolish.
It would cost, in the private, in the public sector,
they could do it way cheaper.
yeah, the public sector is gonna cost $4 million, private sector probably costs less than $1 million. They don't have the restrictions.
Is the property that you're looking at putting the school on generating right now?
$4,000 a year in tax revenue. That's all it generates. 4,400.
Isn't it agricultural?
Yeah, it's 4,400 a year. I got the print out.
I got one more question. Property you talked about acquired, and then one first, the property owner.
Which one?
The residential home.
There is a negotiation going.
How much property is that? Just about by it?
Small. I don't know the exact date. There's a negotiation.
I think it's less than that.
I don't want to discuss what the negotiation status is or what's going on with it, but there is a negotiation. But you can't. I don't want to disparage or negatively impact what the property owner may be thinking about the value of his property or what the committee may be thinking about what the property is worth. So just keep it.
I just make a follow-up comment to Morris about the nature of the estimate, the comment, the concerns about it being conceptual. Two things. One is that in most respects this is sort of ordinary school construction with one big exception, and that's the pitched roofs. Most of the schools that are being done don't have pitched roofs, agreed to be out here. That's reflected in this estimate. There's about $1.5 million in hard construction costs as a delta, as an increased cost for doing pitched roofs. What you see here, when you take into account the $4 million that 3, 4, whatever that number is, to re-roof your existing school, it's just a no-brainer. But in any case, to the degree that there are special characteristics about this building, they are reflected in the estimate. And then secondly, I'll toot our own horn here for a minute. For a concept design, this is just, this is just in another place. You don't usually see this kind of thing in a concept design. We've worked closely with the Gilbane estimators about naming names. I'd encourage you to visit the websites of other high schools that are being proposed in adjoining towns, as it were, and look at what's being done there. I'm not disparaging any of my colleagues who I have the greatest respect for. Just compare the level of documentation you're seeing here to what's typically done at this phase, and come to your own conclusions about the level. We've got every sink, every toilet, every piece of furniture, every door, every window, it's all drawn in here, and every brick for that matter. So in terms of the information provided to the estimators, now they're not obligated to count every brick, but they have all the information to do a very responsible.
Can I just ask a question about the history? Is there also the advantage of that allows for future expansion, whereas if we have flat roofs, that wouldn't allow for that potential? I mean, that's another advantage, right? So we can avoid 15 or 20 years sitting here again looking for an addition on.
Precisely, right. And mentioned about the dormer here, so you're seeing a little piece of it here. But if you envision this running around half the length of this portion of the building, that represents an additional, 5 classrooms on one side, 10 classrooms if you did it on both. And you would want to think seriously about that before you proceeded with this, or you'd oversize footings and maybe even a column or so. It would add pretty significantly to the cost of the initial construction. You'd anticipate that.
I know you don't really want to talk about renovation and renovation options, but about a year and a half ago, there was a comparison made, and the build new, has gone up from what we saw. Can you comment at all about what might have happened if we were sitting with the renovation numbers, if we were sitting here looking at the same type of conceptual design? Would that same sort of trend have happened as well?
You want to comment on it? So we just know a whole heck of a lot more than we did then. Okay, so we were involved there as I mentioned, as consultants to Gilbane. And at that point, they're just looking at pure square footage. And it's just square foot construction costs. That's what a master plan is. It's not based on a design. Now, we assisted looking at all those different options, and we looked at, my God, I think there were 5, 6, 7 different options of different ways to take down square footage. But I'd be first to say that the extraordinary level of investigation that we've done since that time, we just know so much more now than we did before. And and some of the things that contributed to that increased cost, if you look back at that master plan report and you look at the square footages, they're based on the state maximum reimbursable, and then there was one additional number in there for doing a larger auditorium. There wasn't additional square footage for the I'll call it the second gymnasium, and other features that we learned over time are just really important to the town, and you're just simply not willing to move ahead without. And so at 135,000 square feet, you're still paying what's called the space penalty to the state. The state ordinarily wouldn't allow you to do that. I mentioned the auditorium of 300 seats, and that's just not acceptable to you. That's all reflected in these numbers. And when we talk about the state chair versus the town chair, it's all reflected in there. So those contributed to that increased cost. But really, fundamentally, we just know a whole lot more now. And we know that this is a number that gets written in stone. And it gets voted on in a referendum, and has been acknowledged. It's not a number that you can allow for to be wiggly in that way. The master plan is just inherently a limited process.
I just have a follow-up question. If we do nothing, and maybe this is for what is, other than the roof, what would be slated to have to be done in the current building over the next 10 years?
You guys have had a plan.
I think that the key issue is that there are a number of factors that, just from a functionality use, the whole inner core locker room, athletic training room, and bleachers in the main gym are all major issues that would need to be addressed. The lab facilities, the public lab facilities in the main area and in the auditorium, air conditioning for the auditorium, because it's functionally not usable in the early fall and late spring. There are still a number of sections of windows, glass areas, just from strictly from a energy efficiency that one would presume be done, as well as reorganizing, and there's a fairly limited space downstairs in the shop area that would need to be addressed. code, probably the biggest issue is that as you start to do any of those renovations, what you end up getting into in terms of unpredictable costs. That, you know, you can say, okay, it's gonna cost this much to do X, Y, and Z, but once you get into it, you find there are other issues. And then we have a series of older window wall heating units that, you know, will also need ultimately to be addressed over time. And then as Mary Ann and Carrie reminded me, the security factor alone that has been, we've done essentially done all the other buildings in the district to create higher levels of security, and the nature of Morgan in its proximity to the highway, number one, but the number of external doors that exist make it very, very costly to completely secure that building. So, it makes sense.
Yes, with the pitching of the roofing, not with the way the project is right now, but somewhere down the road, if money is out there for solar, the way the roofs are pitched right now, are we
I'll let David
facing?
speak to, solar options.
Yeah, solar options.
The existing Morgan?
Yes, no, not the existing, the new Morgan school, the way the roofs are pitched. If we have a windfall and there's money out there that we can.
Right, so this is where I mentioned that this is at the optimal angle for our latitude for solar exposure. So let's say by comparison, and I'm speaking as this as the architect designed the largest solar array in any public school in Connecticut, in the Department of School in New Haven. So we have some experience with this, and in that case it was done on a flat roof. And frankly, it was a late development because the Connecticut Clean Energy Fund suddenly underwrote half the cost of it. It was a no-brainer to do. But it was not integral to the building in the way we're proposing here. It's done on a flat roof. And there are panels that are sit at an angle about like this, because that's as steep as they can get before they introduce a lot of wind loading problems and would have to be anchored to the roof and require a lot of roof penetrations. So it's not anywhere near as efficient as we could do here, because we can get that optimal angle if we do the roof pitches. So the short answer to your question is yes, it's integrally conceived in how we move ahead. But I would totally agree. You do it if the numbers make sense, you don't do it if the numbers don't.
And then they wouldn't be actually seen from the road because it's...
So you could do it as many or as little as, again, makes sense. They wouldn't be seen at all from the road because this is west facing, and typically you do it all south.
Okay.
So it would be along this roof, and then this roof. And you know, speaking as the architect, I'd like it better if they weren't there, but we designed it in such a way that they were not really attractive.
Brad?
Sure, yesterday, Jack was talking about the fiber for the schools being set up by the end of 2012. So I mean, is the cost of extending the backbone up to this new site been considered?
Not necessarily. The current backbone will go all the way up to Otter Rock.
Oh, it is.
So it will go by this site. So the cost included in terms of bringing it to the school, 75 meters. No problem.
Any other questions?
No, I'd just like to thank the committee for all the time and effort that they have put into
I just want to go over a couple of dates. This is our first presentation. Hopefully, our Board of Selectmen sees fit to move this project forward, and and then we'll be making that same request of the Board of Finance. If they do, we're planning on doing at least 3 public presentations. One of them tentatively scheduled for the 14th of March, where we would give the public an opportunity to ask questions of David, ourselves on the committee, tomorrow from Gilbane. So thank you for coming, and think David said that he would stay after if anybody had any questions. We certainly will as well. So Willie?
We haven't adjourned. Just one thing I'd like to say before we do get out of here. This is going to be on the Board of Selectmen agenda next Wednesday with a resolution from bond council to move forward. And the finance will have a resolution for them the following Monday as well. If there are questions you have not asked tonight and you don't feel you have asked tonight, or if you have more to ask tonight, please ask them. David is here, the whole committee is here. If not, email myself. I will forward them to David, to Jerry, to get responses prior to next Wednesday and prior to the Board of Finance meeting. So please send them along. I anticipate David coming to our meeting next Wednesday. Brad wants to come to the Board of Finance, express that to Jerry. But please, if you have questions you have not asked, and you think of something going down the line before next Wednesday, it's probably by the end of the week, hopefully, let me know so we can forward that on to David tomorrow, and we can get the appropriate answers for the selectmen and the Board of Finance, okay? I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. A motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Second? John didn't get it. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?